It's a late night edition of the Illini Inquirer Podcast with a 2-commitment day from Illinois football, trying to end the class of 2023 with a bang heading into the early signing period. And of course, we had the transfer portal happening. Collin Dixon, 3-star wide receiver, added to the class. Also, an offensive lineman transfer from East Carolina University in Avery Jones. We will talk about those two new commitments. It's Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner with you. Both on offense, one longer term, one very short term. We'll discuss the quarterback question. We'll talk about other transfer needs. We'll talk about draft decisions here coming up. Got a lot to get to, but Joey, before that, I just want to say our thoughts are with Mike Leach, his family, the Mississippi State community. Obviously, tragedy has struck there, and we've read all the same reports most people listening to this podcast have, and it certainly sounds dire. There'll be a day we can talk about what that means for the bowl game and all of that, but today's not that day. We don't have answers about any of those things, so any of your speculation about that, I don't know. But I just want to extend our thoughts to everyone affected by a terrible health situation. For one of college football's most original voices, certainly unique personality, and certainly Joey, a damn good coach.
Yeah, it came out as a surprise. It started really picking up steam yesterday, Jeremy, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really, really, it's dire there. And it's been, I don't want to say nice or refreshing, but I have enjoyed the clips of Mike Leach that have found their way onto my Twitter timeline, because he is a fun personality, and like you get a good laugh at going back and seeing some of those. And you need voices like that in college football, right? And he was a fun voice, or is a fun voice in college football, and that's tough, man. Yes, extend our thoughts over there, because that's a really tough situation.
Yeah. So there's no good transition here. So let's get into the two new Illini commits here, Joey. Collin Dixon, let's start with the prep guy. 3-star Ohio wide receiver, committed to Wisconsin in June over Illinois. But as we're seeing late in this process, due to some coaching changes, due to other things, Illinois got a second chance here, and they made the most of it. George McDonald had a really good relationship with him, but Dixon adds a really good talent. I'll say it here. I think he's one of the best wide receivers this staff has gotten so far. 6'2", 205 pounds, shows good speed on film. Don't know if it's like 4.5 and under speed, but certainly good speed. He can take the top off of defense every once in a while. And he's just a good overall skill set. Kind of compare him to Sean Miller a little bit. Just insanely productive during high school. You'd rather see that than not. It doesn't always mean the most, but it is great to see that. Last 3 years of varsity football for him, dating back to his sophomore year, 201 receptions for 3,561 yards and 43 touchdowns. Each of his upperclassmen years of high school, 1,400 plus yards, 18 plus touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. Thoughts, Joey?
Those are ridiculous numbers. Those are, I'm pulling up the IHSA records now just to like put in comparison with the all-time receiving, let's just say receiving yardage here for a career. 4,500 by Jordan Westerkamp from Montini from 2008 to 11. That's the all-time. Justin Wright, I covered him at Taylorville, 3,817. I mean, so just like a perspective thing that, I mean, the number 20 in the state all-time is 2,863 by Dannon Young from Greenville. So just for reference, that's like a top 20 all-time wide receiver career in the state of Illinois, as far back as these IHSA records go on their website. So yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, like and you watch the film, he is fast, but he's tall and he's long, and he's like kind of what you've seen Illinois lack a little bit here in this wide receiver room, which has been completely redone. And I know we'll get to that, Jeremy, but this is like the welcome to the second chances portion of the class of 2023. And Collin Dixon is certainly part of that. I would assume Illinois hopes he's not the last and final part of that. As of right now, he's is it the first? I'm trying to remember if there's another before him, but he's in the early stages of the come back around and keep those relationships going, recruitment.
Yeah, this is a big get. In Illinois thinks this is a big get, and I do too. He was one of my favorite targets of theirs early on in this class, and I just think George McDonald is doing a fantastic job here, Joey, of rebuilding a wide receiver room that, let's just be frank, this was a huge weakness that Brett Bielema inherited. And first game of the Brett Bielema era against Nebraska, a win, they started Isaiah Williams at wide receiver, who was playing his first game at that position.
Full time.
Full game at that position, played the Red Box Bowl a couple of years ago. Donnie Navarro, who went to Northwestern, and I think Illinois showed they upgraded. I love Donnie, but like obviously they needed to upgrade that position. Also, Casey Washington in his second real year of playing a lot, and then Kamari Thompson, who has been on the roster this year but barely played, right? So the way they developed Brian Hightower this year, the way Pat Bryant is developing, the way Isaiah Williams is developing, George McDonald's a good coach, right? And Casey Washington, I think it shows. He's the fourth wide receiver on this team this year. He's a good Big Ten player, but it's showing how that room is getting better. But then the last two recruiting classes without really much to sell, right? In terms of being able to pass the ball. Last year they get Hank Beatty, Ian Pugh, two really good in-state prospects. Sean Miller was one of the best gets last year, and he probably would have played a decent amount of snaps if he didn't get hurt twice this past year. Ashton Hollins, we'll see how he develops, but certainly a guy with length and speed. And now in this class, Collin Dixon, you're in the mix for Malik Elzy. Is Kenari Wilcher going to play wide receiver? I'd be almost surprised at this point if Terraman Lott is part of your class. He just took an official to Florida International and has one scheduled to Rutgers. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to put my crystal ball on that, because I don't think it's going to end up with Illinois. He said his recruitment's 100% open. But you had Dixon, Wilcher, who had 1,500 plus yards. They recruited him as a defensive back, but we've thought he's a better wide receiver prospect. Seems like that might be the case. And then if you could add Elzy to it. But even if it's just Dixon and Wilcher adding to the class last year, Joey, George is doing a really good job here.
He is, and not only in the talent acquisition, which you laid out, but I think the pitch that Brett Bielema has, that George McDonald has, is look at what Brian Hightower did this year. And look, it wasn't an All-American season, it wasn't an All-Big Ten season, but like you saw development from him, and you see it with Pat Bryant. Like he is a guy that he's a pretty exciting player on this roster, and George McDonald helped take him up to another level there. So you combine that, Jeremy, with the talent that is starting to come in there. And it is like the recruitment. We can break down some of the high school kids a little bit, because there's like two different tiers. It's like the kind of ready-made Hank Beatty, Sean Miller. I think you could put, if they were to land Malik Elzy, would be in that conversation. I think Collin Dixon is a guy who, the further you get from the snap, you probably have a better chance to play immediately. Then you have some of the longer-term guys, the Ian Hugh, the Ashton Hollins, or Ian Pugh, excuse me, who need to add strength. And like, so you kind of have a mix there, and the timeline does line up with just the eligibility of some of the guys they have in their starting lineup right now. It's really remarkable, Jeremy, because I remember spring ball, this coaching staff's first spring ball, and you and I, we recorded our spring podcast, and it's like, oh man, it was tough sledding. It really was. And there's still, it's a lot to prove in that room, but the talent, like the talent floor is coming up quite a bit.
Yeah. Doesn't seem that long ago that we thought Jafar Armstrong had to be a starter on this team, right? And
My goodness, yeah.
End up making an impact there. So if you want the comps, right, for a guy like Dixon, he's not the biggest. Like, what is impressive about Malik Elzy is he is 6'3", 200 plus pounds, but if you watch him, he is very physical. Shout out to the guy, Matt Spiegel, up at 6'7", the scorer for Gwagi guy. He goes up and get it. Like, that's what Malik Elzy is. He's got vertical explosiveness, fantastic hands, not the fastest guy. I think he's kind of a Malik Turner / maybe Josh Ahmed or Baby. I think he's a little bit better of a quick twitch guy, but Ahmed or Baby is explosive, vertically, big, physical. I think that's what kind of Malik Elzy would be. Collin Dixon's more like a Sean Miller, maybe more like a Ricky Smalling. I threw that at somebody the other day, and they said probably a little bit twitchier than a Ricky Smalling, but Smalling was a very good player, could get the deep ball. Dixon is that caliber player, and they need more of those. We talked about that. They need more guys who can get separation, stretch the field. I think Dixon can be a part of that. but I also think he's got some versatility like Sean Miller, and that he's a good route runner. And he can potentially take a screen pass and make a defender miss. Like I think he's capable of doing some of that stuff. So he's not an elite, like a one elite trait guy, but he's just kind of good at everything. And that's how I felt about Sean Miller. So I think he's a little bit longer, a little bit taller than Sean Miller, but I think both those guys are very high floor guys.
Yeah, you're starting to see them fill some of those needs that they need. And like you said, they need a guy to get separation. They need more than one guy, Jeremy, to get separation. That was, from our perspective, an issue with this team this year. So yeah, you start to address positional needs. I think that's where everybody's eyes goes. Okay, who's going to be the quarterback? Who's going to be this, that, or the other? Like within those rooms, especially the wide receivers, defensive back rooms, like you have needs within there, and you're starting to see Illinois address those. And Collin Dixon's a guy who does that. That was a really big get. I mean, I remember he was visiting a game. He was still committed to Wisconsin, but it was after the coaching changed, and it was like, well, what's the deal here? Like it was hard to, and then it just went, and it picked up fast, and it closed fast, and they had him on a campus for an official. That's why Brett Bielema has mentioned several times in those things on a good note. And I think if I remember right, I don't want to say this incorrectly, but I think at one point in the last 2 years that we've known him, I think he's indicated his mindset with that has probably changed from his younger time as a head coach, and that maturity is helping him bring some more talent into Champaign.
It's what pays off with experience, Joey, of doing this job is you learn not to burn bridges, especially in recruiting, because you recruit until they sign. And Illinois has found out that with the other way, being an unstable program, you get picked apart, right? If a coaching change happens, you get picked apart. Now Illinois was here when Wisconsin, instability. It's not something we usually think of now. Enjoy that while you can, because Luke Fickell is there, and I think he's going to do a very good job. But yeah, he told me during the visit that if Jim Leonard remained the coach, he might still be there. Now I think Jim Leonard was going to let go of that entire offensive staff if he got the job, but kudos to Brett Bielema and the staff for not ending it on a sour note and say, oh, you're not going to do well there, right? Like after they commit, say you're making a mistake or something like that. He's like, hey, something changes, let me know. We'd love to have you. That's basically what the conversation is. And it kept the door open, and other schools came in. Northwestern was one of those. Not a great sell. He went to Northwestern the day Illinois crushed him 41-3. So it only probably helped Illinois here. But Collin told me yesterday that with Illinois, he didn't have to wait until February to sign and risk maybe losing the Illinois thing. He had some other schools come in for him, but he would have had to maybe spend more time visiting those programs, getting to know those coaches. He knew Illinois. He really liked Illinois. He just liked Wisconsin and that program a little bit better because it was a better program and it was a more proven program. So Illinois hung around and did a good job of getting that. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with Roderick Pierce, Malik Elzy, right? Those things can come around. And when you have success, some more doors open, maybe up down the road.
Yeah, Jeremy, that could very well be kind of the story of this recruiting class if Illinois is able to pull off what it's attempting to pull off. I remember that Zachary Toby was committed to North Carolina early on in this process, and Illinois stuck around and kept that door open. So that's kind of the game, right? And it's just a matter of the timeline, because with the portal, the way that the portal is, you always kind of have to assume that you're going to get another chance at somebody. Whether you do or don't, it remains to be seen, but you've got to just think that could happen. And in this case, you're not even getting the portal process of it. You're getting it earlier than that, but it's one of those things. It's changed it, man. And every coach should have that philosophy of, you don't want to kind of crap on a kid on his way out the door. I mean, recruiting kind of cutthroat, Jeremy, but you got to keep those relationships going.
You are right. It is more important than ever to know that in recruiting. If I don't get him the first time around, maybe this helps in a year or 2 or 4 years from now. That if I want to leave a good impression of this kid, because this could be important anytime during his college career. So we've seen that pay off in the transfer portal as well. Speaking of the transfer portal, Illinois lands its second transfer commitment in this class. Avery Jones, a center out of East Carolina University. He is a former four-star prospect who originally signed with North Carolina. He's from North Carolina, told me he grew up a Tar Heels fan. He was a class of 2018 guy. He's got one more year of eligibility. He is a plug-and-play center. He started 3 years at East Carolina, one at guard, the last two at center. His best seasons were last year, certainly his best season, but actually his first year at East Carolina, because then when he switched positions, he kind of struggled a little bit. But you can turn on the tape, Joey. This is a guy that's 6'4", 290. I imagine he might add even a little bit more strength, but all the physical tools are there. He's experienced. He's played a decent level of competition in the AAC. And this fills a big need for Illinois at center with Alex Pihlstrom out the door. Certainly need a veteran in there and a bigger presence probably than Josh Kreutz. So this will be your starting center next year. He's going to come in January and play right away with snapping the ball to whoever that quarterback's going to be.
Do you love talking offensive lineman at like 9:25? Is that like the Jeremy Werner dream? Nothing
sounds better than talking about who's going to start on the offensive line, which is one of my topics I want to get to, because this is a huge part of everything Illinois is. I know we want to talk about Malik Elzy. I know the quarterback is important. We will talk about it. What has made this program good the last 2 years? It is the offensive line and a great dominant defensive front. The secondary is awesome this year, probably the best part, but Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph and Calvin Avery and all those guys were so important. But last 2 years, man, this has been a strength of Illinois. And with two of the additions they've made already, right? Desmond Schuster, who I don't even know if we put him in our starting five at this point, but you add Avery Jones to a group that's going to return Isaiah Adams, going to return Zy Chrysler. It's starting to look like it's going to be a strong unit again.
Yeah, first let's start with the pitch to Avery Jones. Like, has Illinois turned into that come here and we will like push you over the edge? Like, is that their pitch? We'll push you over the edge for your NFL dreams?
That is why he's coming to Illinois. That's exactly why. Do you want me to get the quote?
Yeah, do so. I mean, I know I read it, so maybe it was like subconsciously in my mind, but that's the pitch right now at Illinois is we're going to get you as close as, as far as you can take yourself. We're going to help get you there. Yeah. And the pitch is pretty damn good right now.
I was looking for a program that's the next step to the NFL, and that's what Illinois has to offer. Definitely, coaching his connections with the NFL, his history of the NFL. So him bringing that knowledge to Illinois and running the program the same way is what really drew me to Illinois. And then he rattled off the Bielema has the second most draft picks of Power 5 head coaches and the offensive line during his career. He mentioned the 5 all Big Ten offensive linemen. Yeah, it's a really strong pitch. And that's why even when you're thinking, oh, they're going to lose Julian Pearl and Alex Pihlstrom, and, Julian has a decision to make, but it seems like he's leaning towards the NFL. You're going to lose Alex Palczewski, All-American, by the way. Kudos to Alex Palczewski in his 6th year. I was never worried about them landing offensive linemen because their pitch is awesome and they know it.
If you were wondering, like, hey, I wonder what Illinois' pitch is when they host these visitors, Jeremy just read it to you. Avery Jones read it to you. That's the pitch. You don't really need a lot more than that. And it's not just the last 2 years at Illinois. Bart Miller, Brett Bielema, they've done this with some guys. Can we just talk real quick about, like we did with the wide receivers, the offensive line development? So the additions, Jack Badovinac for 1 year in 2021. Rocky start, really strong finish for him. Isaiah Adams, Zy Chrysler, Desmond Schuster have been your junior college additions to date. They're still working, obviously, on Keyshawn Blockstock. He's still in the conversation. You added Dylan Davis from the transfer portal. You added Avery Jones from the transfer portal. The class of 2022, Mountis Moeller, Hunter Whiteneck, Joey Okla, Clayton Leonard, Matt Fries was in that class. He's elected to enter the transfer portal. Class of 2023, you and I think, Jeremy, 2 really nice in-state additions with Brandon Henderson, TJ McMillan, and then you go back out to Jersey and get Zachary Amland. They have completely changed this room. The Brett Bielema viral comments from a year and a half ago feel like forever ago because this is short-term additions at Avery Jones and Badovinac, that middle term with the JUCOs, and then long-term with the preps. Like They've tiered this up, and this room was battered when they got there beyond the starters.
Right. Like there was great group of starters, really good group of starters that they got to work with.
NFL guys.
No depth whatsoever. That's what Brett Bielema was talking about, because we've gone over this stat. Like the class of 2020 is no longer there, right? The class of 2019, the only guy left on the roster from that O-line class is Evan Kurtz, and he's playing defensive line now. So you had 2 recruiting classes of nothing. And then you have a young class and Josh Kreutz, who does everything right, I'm told. He's undersized. Like he's undersized, and he's going to struggle against Big Ten defensive linemen most likely. Zach Barlev is in the 2 deep. Josh Geske is a name to know, potentially could compete for a starting spot and going to be probably one of their top 8 offensive linemen next year. Those guys were signed after Lovie got fired, right? Never played for Lovie. The only guy left on this roster, assuming Julian Pearl leaves, that played for Lovie Smith is Jordan Slaughter on the offensive line. We're only 2 years away from that. And the only guy left is Jordan. The rest, now with Pihlstrom, Palczewski gone, Julian Pearl potentially going pro, the rest are all Brett Bielema guys.
That is, I mean, when I don't want to keep rehashing those comments, because you and I both, we can talk about the context of it all and how it was taken out. The point you're seeing like that get rectified. Like, I just think that's such a good starting point when you evaluate this offensive line room, is from that point and everything you mentioned and all the context that goes around what he said to this point where Bart Miller has to feel like I can get whoever I want, and I'm going to have it like, I could probably talk coach into maybe giving me an extra spot, because this thing is moving.
Yeah, we got to see how all these guys develop, but they're doing this on parallel tracks, right? They're like replenishing the current 2 deep with these transfers and JUCO guys, while also adding good offensive line prospects. Now, last year's guys didn't have a lot of offers. Matt Fries had the most Power 5 offers. The only other guy was Maunus Muller. Of course, that was a COVID class that wasn't able to go to these camps and all of that. We think Joey Okla and Hunter Whitenack probably going to start games. Clayton Leonard just got the Look Team offensive player of the year. They are more encouraged with him than I think they thought they'd be at this point. And Maunus Muller is a massive man. He's a massive man, big mound of clay from Denmark. We'll see how that looks in a year or two, right?
Waking up in 24 on him.
But this class, TJ McMillan had double-digit Power 5 offers. Zach Amlin had a handful or 2 of Power 5 offers. Brandon Henderson.
Second chance.
Yeah, another second chance guy. Was committed to Iowa State. Tom Manning no longer at Iowa State. You swayed a guy from Matt Campbell and Tom Manning. I thought said a lot, because those guys are really good offensive line guys. Big Power 5 offers, right? And then Desmond Schuster gets a Nebraska offer the day after Illinois got his commitment. And now you had a guy in Avery Jones. To be honest, I think he's more talented than Alex Pihlstrom, right? I watched the film, and Alex Pihlstrom had a great year. All Big Ten second team by coaches. Phenomenal. One of my favorite guys to cover on this team, talk to on this team. A phenomenal story. This is a former 4-star prospect you just added. This guy has a higher ceiling than Alex Pihlstrom. I watched a little bit of his film, Joey. He's got everything you want in center, but I still think he can be better, even though he's a good FBS center already. And I think that's what Illinois sees, is that they can make him even better. So I think this could be an upgrade at this position. Now, upgrading over Palczewski and Pearl is going to be difficult, but you think Zy Chrysler is going to be better. You think Isaiah Adams could be an NFL guy next year, because he had 120 knockdowns this year, which is basically pancakes. It's a ridiculous number. I think he at times was the best offensive lineman on this team. That's a good 3 to start with. Jordan Slaughter, can be a serviceable to good starter for you. And then you potentially add a Keyshawn Blockstock. Like, if you can land him or another JUCO or another transfer offensive lineman who can start, and then Schuster's like your 6th guy, Joey.
He's your Jordan Slaughter.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're starting to have depth here. And then you have Geske, who they think can play, Barlev, who they think they can play. Is Dylan Davis ready to play?
Whiteneck did not redshirt this year. Whiteneck's a guy to watch.
Is Whiteneck ready? Like all of a sudden you're starting to have a two deep of guys you feel like you can play in a Big Ten football game. Like that's what we're starting to see. Yet the talent doesn't feel like it's dropping off, even if you lose a Pearl or Palchett. That's what Wisconsin does every year. Yeah. Can Illinois be getting to that point? We'll have to see, but I'm not worried about this position with this staff.
You know, and I think we learned our lesson last offseason when the questions that we had about the line were every bit of fair, right? You lose Vidarian Lowe, you lose Doug Kramer, you thought Alex Palczewski was out, and all those depth things. And then they turned around and had a pretty good season. They were semifinalists for the Joe Moore Award. It was up and down, right? I mean, I don't think anyone would argue otherwise. But by and large, it was a pretty good season for the Illinois offensive line. So I think at that point, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't think we get to ask those questions anymore. I mean, if you want to think about it, that's fair. But I think as you watch this reload, and I know you've talked to Bart Miller about this and the junior college market and kind of the ripe market that is for a coaching staff to get into. And it helps that the first two guys give you pretty good pitches. That's long term, right? I mean, not in 2-year guys there. So eventually this is going to probably maybe be less transfer, heavy, quote unquote, but it doesn't have to be. Nothing has to be anymore. Like I think we've decided it doesn't have to be anymore. But the development there, Jeremy, the depth, there could be 8-9 guys in spring ball, 10 guys where you're like, man, all right, that might be a chance there.
I don't think you're going to be adding 3 transfers on the offensive line.
Sure.
Like that's what they're doing this year. That probably won't happen in the future. But the fact, Blackstock is great. Like I think he's a better prospect than Isaiah Adams, which is why he's got offers from 45 schools. Illinois was one of the first Power 5 offers. They got him on campus early. Some other big time programs are in the mix for him. I think USC just offered. Like he's taken a couple of visits. Florida State. I can't remember the others off the top of my head. Penn State was in the mix there. South Carolina, like some big time programs, right? Like so, we'll see where that one ends up. But Illinois has done a good job getting in there early. But the fact that they've negated, to bring this full circle, they've negated that issue that he got reamed about before the Penn State game. Like they have done a phenomenal job in the JUCO and transfer portal and have had maintained good offensive lines after the good offensive line they inherited.
Yeah. And think about the Blackstock thing, Jeremy, because obviously Illinois would love to get him and he would be a great addition. A year ago, he's like, this line might be screwed without him. Like Alex Palczewski's waiver, right? Like you would have had questions. You're without question a better offensive line with him. Like that should not be a conversation. With him, better offensive line. But there's not fire in the room if you don't get him. And I just think that's how programs long-term go. And at no point am I trying to say if he doesn't commit to Illinois, that's just whatever, because that's a really talented football player. I just think it's just a factor of how time has changed in the course of a year where you have options. There are just options. That's the best way I can put it. There are options on the offensive line. And it used to be, my God, what happens if one of those starters gets hurt? Just one.
All right, let's project this. Left tackle, Isaiah Adams, right?
Depending probably on Julian Pearl?
Yes. I'm assuming Pearl is gone because he's basically said it, right?
Sure.
Now they're trying to convince him. I think he could gain something by coming back next year. If they get Pearl back, oh boy. But yes, okay. Right now, if we're going to assume Pearl is gone, it's Isaiah Adams.
Yes.
Okay. Left guard.
And quickly, because that helps his NFL. One, he's your best left tackle option, but that versatility is probably a pitch to him as well that, hey, you're going to get a chance to show you have a full season of guard, full season of tackle tape. That's going to be a thumbs up from GMs to see that. Just a quick to interject, right? That's a big deal.
Center is Avery Jones. There's no question. The guard spots. Would we put Jordan Slaughter as a definite?
That to me depends on where Chrysler goes.
Well, that's why I was going to say Chrysler, I would plug into guard.
I would too.
Who is the right tackle? That might depend on whether they land Blackstock. It might depend on, is Josh Geske ready to be the guy?
What if Julian Pearl is back?
Well, that's fantastic.
Then is Isaiah Adams the right tackle in that case?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I know we're trying to set the stage that he's gone, but I'm just trying to work through all of these options.
No, that's nice to have options. Zy Chrysler, could he move to tackle? I think he's a guard.
Mm-hmm.
So I would put Chrysler and Slaughter at guard with the potential if you don't land a JUCO or a transfer, which I think you will, that would probably be the other tackle. But then you'd have Geske, Whitenack probably in the competition at tackle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when Chrysler committed, there was some thought like, hey, he could kick out to guard or to tackle rather. I think the eye test, and the coaching staff hasn't said this to us on the record or off the record, but I just think you and I with the eye test think that probably didn't manifest maybe like the thought would have. So guard seems like the spot for him.
But if he can be serviceable at right tackle, right?
You have Schuster
potentially could play guard, or Schuster's not the like tallest guy, but his arms are the size of like the
incredibly long
NFL tackle. Yeah, like his arms are ridiculously long. For anybody that knows, like an 82-inch wingspan on an offensive tackle is ridiculous. 37-inch arms. The biggest question about Peter Skoronski, who's an unbelievable offensive lineman, right? It's going to be a top 15 pick most likely. But he's got 32.5-inch arms. So that just puts it into perspective. 37 for Desmond Schuster. But he's not getting here till June. Yeah. My expectation, like offensive line and quarterback, I think it's really important to get here earlier than most of the other ones. There's just a lot more rhythm things, timing things, communication things, getting in the playbook, I think is really important. So that's why I just didn't name Schuster right away, because it's not the same situation as Chrysler, and they got younger guys that provide more competition than in the past.
Yeah, and quickly to have fun. How soon? Brett Bielema could actually talk about these guys in like 9 days. I think is the 21st. How quickly into describing Schuster does he bring up the arms? And why is it the first 2 sentences?
This guy say the first 3 words.
Yeah,
length or wingspan is going to be the first sentence, I'm sure.
It is going to come up very quickly. And Jim, we should also mention, Zach Barlev is a guy who I would have thought going into this year, and I think was fair, like of that class of 2021, he was the guy that you and I were probably like, yeah, of any of those 3, we would have to say him. And I think we see him probably as a guard.
Yeah.
Right. Like so now the need becomes either a tackle or can somebody kick out there and be serviceable enough? And that's the fascinating part of this puzzle. And again, to your point, 2 things just change that and make it moot. And that's either A, Julian Pearl returning, or B, Keyshawn Blockstock committing. And if you get one of those, who cares? Right? Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter how the puzzle shapes out. Like this is what it is.
All right, Joey, let's talk about who's next. They just hosted a couple other visitors as well. We'll talk about transfer needs, and we will get to the quarterback question here. But Illinois is battling Michigan for 2 star recruits in state. And we did this in January or February, where you, me, and Ryan Easterling answered who's the most important guy in the in-state class. I think you and Ryan took Jyaire Hill, Malik Elzy, or Caden Fagan was one of them, and they landed him. I went, because you guys covered it, I went Roderick Pierce, because I think he's really good. Chicago Brother Rice, 3-star defensive lineman, number 12 in state, according to the composite, number 9, according to 24/7, because he's really good. They gotten in early on him, and huge position of need, because we knew Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph wouldn't be here long. And we knew, kind of like the offensive line, there were a couple of recruiting classes where defensive line wasn't addressed well. So Roderick Pierce to me was always a big one. All of a sudden, he commits to Wisconsin after Illinois felt like the leader the entire time. Quickly, Wisconsin offers, they close. I think it was just part about being the Wisconsin program. But now Illinois just had a great year. Michigan and Texas have offered. He hasn't visited Texas. He has taken official to Michigan. He's taken 2 official visits now to Illinois, and he just took an official visit this weekend. I know our boy Sam Webb at Michigan Insider just put in a crystal ball with a confidence meter of 6. From what I was told going into this visit, it was pretty close between those two, and there was some cautious optimism coming out of this one. I know the Malik Elzy, Jyaire Hill are going to get a lot of attention. I think this Roderick Pierce one could be as big of a get as any in this class if they get him because of the things I talked about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And because it did feel like in the summer, there was so much, like that late spring, early summer, midsummer, there's so much traction, it felt like, and they had good vibes about where Illinois stood with that. We saw him at the basketball game on his official visit, Jeremy, on Saturday morning. Large individual, that guy. He is that's the first time I had seen him, because you were Ryan. It's an easier logistically for you guys to go see some of the Chicagoland kids. So that was the first time I had seen him in the flesh. It's a large gentleman, man. Like, he is a big guy, and like, second chance. That's going to be the narrative of this class. And this is a guy who second chance at a pretty significant position of need. And whether that need pops up kickoff 2023 or kickoff 2024, that remains to be seen. But depth and maybe immediate playing time is like, that is a big deal here. And he's be a lot of good feelings for Illinois if they could pull that off and beat Michigan and get their guy in state. And just a tough one. It's going to be a tough one.
Michigan Cell is awesome, right? I mean, back-to-back college football playoffs, NFL guys, Big Ten champs, back-to-back years. The one thing going against them is the questions about Harbaugh. It feels like he's going to be mentioned every year, is potentially leaving. So Illinois maybe can sell stability better than Michigan right now, which is weird to say. But I mean, even Illinois fans have to admit Michigan has a great sell right now. But Illinois has had the relationship for way longer. Michigan just offered a couple months ago, just started the relationship. Illinois, Jamison has been in there the whole time. And what a bounce back this would be for Terrence Jamison, right? I mean, May defensive line recruiting looked bleak. And then they got Jamarian Harkless, and then they lost him. And I think Moragan and Alex Bray are good prospects, but Roderick Pierce is a different level. And I never expect defensive linemen to play their first year. He's a little bit more advanced technically, playing at Chicago Brother Rice, playing with really good coaches and really good talent. And he's got great size already. He's got great athleticism. Probably going to play the Johnny Newton role if he came here in this defense. And Illinois got a decent sell right now. So I know they're working him really, really hard. Be interesting to see where that one goes. Jyaire Hill, man, it's been Illinois and Michigan for a year. And I'm just waiting for the decision at this point, because you hear things, you hear this, you hear that. Michigan certainly, again, has a great sell. Jaire's kept this one really close to the vest outside of wearing Illinois and Michigan gear to a lot of different places. He's visited a lot of different places, but I can't read him. I can't read him. It would not surprise me if he went to Michigan. It would not surprise me if he went to Illinois. The one question here would be Ryan Walters. Is he back? Right? You'd love to have an answer for him there. I don't know if we'll have that until maybe Purdue fills its vacancy.
Yeah, at some point, whether it's Illinois, whether it's Michigan, whether it's outside looking in school, somebody who covers one of these programs owes the readers an oral history of the Jyaire Hill recruitment, because that would be the most information we've ever gotten out of the damn thing.
He won't be quoted very often because I've talked to Jyaire several times. He's a challenging interview. And he's a good kid from everything I've gathered, but it's like, he is a challenge. Like, he doesn't say much, but yes, I would love for somebody to take me through what was actually going through his head. I don't think coaches know what is going through Jyaire Hill's head. So it's kind of fascinating.
It's not even been a high drama recruitment, to be honest. Like, it's been actually the polar opposite. It's been, hey, could you say anything, please? Like, is there anything you would like to share? And hey, that's not a knock on the kid. If that's how you want to go about it, respect, good for you. But this has been a pretty, from the outside looking in, pretty quiet, pretty seamless operation, just waiting, literally just waiting for what it's going to be. But yeah, man, he's been these last three guys, really, these last three high school guys that we talk about. Well, I know Malik Elzy's next on our conversation list, I assume. This is, I mean, you're fighting some real programs for really good players. Yeah,
I'm not trying to give Illinois fans, like, if you miss out on these two, like it's something great, right? I'm not trying to give you a moral victory here, but the fact that you're battling Michigan for two of the top 12 prospects down to the wire, this has not been the case for this program for a really long time. So the fact that, like, Jyaire Hill just didn't commit to Michigan in the spring or early fall or whatever after an official visit here, the fact that
he's several unofficials, by the way, like it's not like that's an uncharted place for him, dude.
I don't think he's come to Illinois 9 times because he's just messing with Illinois, like screwing with them, right? Like, I think he is very interested. Roderick Pierce, I don't think, takes an official visit with his family if he knows he's definitely going to Michigan. I think he was giving Illinois a chance, and we'll see if they can land those two guys. Then Malik Elzy, man, since he decommitted from Cincinnati, from what I know, he's visited one place, it's Illinois. He didn't take his visit that he was going to take to Wisconsin and Luke Fickell, and he was committed to Fickell at Cincinnati. He's going to sign with somebody in December. He's going to announce it January 7th, the All-America Bowl. And if I'm Illinois, I feel pretty good.
Again, another one. I wouldn't call this one a high drama one either.
No.
A lot of weight. He committed, he decommitted. Then pretty much radio silence, right? And again, I don't mean that as a knock, but like for 4 stars, top in-state kids, this has been pretty easy to follow on the outside looking in terms of like, it doesn't appear to us like there's a lot of smoke screens or it's just kind of, let you know when you know. And it just, I mean, those 3 guys, Jeremy, in whatever combination, you want to go all 3, 1 of 3, 2 or 3, it doesn't matter. That can change the perspective of this class or how people from the outside view this class.
Which matters. Like, I don't know if all those guys will turn into stars, but if you land one of them, you get Malik Elzy or Jyaire Hill or Roderick Pierce, that's a good headline to go along with Caden Fagan. If you land 2 of those, it's been a long time since Illinois has gotten 3 of the top 12 in-state. I think it's more than a decade since you've gotten 3 of the top 10 prospects in the state. If you get all 4 of those guys and you get 4 of the top 12, we're starting to talk about a top 30 class nationally, and we haven't even mentioned Keyshawn Blockstock's potential impact as a 4-star prospect. Like, all of a sudden, you can show I'm Brett Bielema and I have the best recruiting class since Ron Zook's 2 5-star class in 2007. Like, that's what is possible in these last couple of weeks, and most importantly, like, they're really good football players. But if you can get guys like Pierce, Hill, and Elzy, all of a sudden more of those kids in Chicago are starting to pay attention because they know each other, they talk to each other. That's why in-state recruiting is so important, because it feeds off each other.
Yeah, and I remember, I don't remember what we were doing. It must have been a basketball game, Jeremy. Yeah, it had to have been, because we were at the State Farm Center and we were recording maybe after signing day when the Palcho thing was still kind of, I think Brett Bielema threw a nugget out there and everyone was like, oh my God, what in the world are you talking about? I remember being at the State Farm Center with you and we talked about how 22 was kind of that, hey, I'm Brett Bielema, nice to meet you. How fast can we get this party moving type of class, because he had just been hired, his coaching staff had just been hired. And I remember saying, Jeremy, this class of 2023, and we talked about this has got some stars in it, and it's got some headliners and guys who can change the perception and the trajectory potentially. We've seen 4 stars not work out, but just perception and I good football players of your program. And to do that in year 2, like, that's a quick statement from Brett Bielema, from his coaching staff, and like that also matters.
And it shows what you can do with 2 full years of recruiting.
That's right.
And
1 real year.
Yeah. And winning as well. Right. Like, George McDonald, Blake told me this after his official visit in June. George McDonald told him in January 2021, I'm going to recruit you until signing day, and I'm going to work harder than anybody to land you. And he has done that. And we'll find out after the break if it happens, right? Like, so kudos to them. They made in-state recruiting a priority, and it's paying off. And this is where you really could see the exclamation points of that. All right,
real quick, it cannot be understated, and this is probably a silly thing because I think it's just assumed. 8-4 made a lot of this, like, to be sitting here on December 12th and talking about Illinois still fighting for some of these in-state guys, for Keyshawn Blockstock, to talk about the 2 commitments that they just received. 8-4 mattered a whole heck of a lot in getting to this point where you're still fighting down the stretch going into signing day. Like that is a huge, huge deal.
And the other thing, you know what they care about? They want to win. They care about NFL guys, right? And Avery Jones just told you that. They can't sell it at wide receiver. They certainly can at running back. They certainly can soon at defensive back with 3 guys that could get drafted, including 1 maybe in the first round. And they can do it soon in the defensive line. So like all of that stuff matters. All right, transfer needs. They still got some other holes to fill. Tight end has been a big focus for them. Tanner Arkin out of Colorado State, redshirt freshman kid, looks the part, has played a little bit, but they like him. Potential complementary piece, can catch the ball a little bit, block a little bit. They need somebody probably to fill in along with Tip Ryman, with Luke Ford moving on, and Michael Marquez out. Like they like Henry Boyer, I think, for next year to potentially play a role. Defensive line will be a need if Johnny Newton or Keith Randolph or both decide to go pro. But cornerback has certainly been, cornerback and tight end now, and we'll get to the quarterback thing. Those after quarterback are the huge needs, it feels like, based on the offers they're throwing out. D-line seems like a wait and see thing right now, because I can tell you they're trying to get Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph back. NIL them is the biggest. That's the biggest thing with maintaining a roster. We'll talk about it with Tommy DeVito, but these guys can come back and make a lot of money playing college football. So if you're a 4th or 5th rounder or a 7th rounder, I'm sure they're talking about that with Julian Pearl. Like, you can potentially make more money next year or as much and boost your draft stock for the long term coming back to play college football.
Yeah, and boy, I long for the day before we get into this actual conversation that it doesn't have to be. We'll get to the quarterback in a second, because that is a very it's stressful for us in the sense that it's just so quiet. And I know you and I don't like being able to provide that information, but we also don't want to lie to anybody either and tell you. But at any rate, the tight end is interesting, Jeremy, because I think you like to see them get somebody a little more dynamic. Like, Tip Ryman can block. Henry Boyer, like that's kind of the thing with him, is he can be a blocker. And that's not to minimize the fact that they are capable pass catchers. But I think if you could complement those, this goes back to the wide receiver, like within the room, I'm speculating, but you would probably want somebody who's a little bit more dynamic as a pass catcher.
Yeah, because you didn't miss Daniel Barker as a blocker. You missed him as a pass catcher. You missed him as somebody that the defense had to respect. I thought Marquez did a really solid job, like kind of underrated. I think he had the most receiving yards out of a tight end, or was close with Tip this past year. I think Tip's got another level. I just think he needs more experience doing it. He's certainly not the guy I want going deep on those seam routes. He didn't seem comfortable this year with those things, but I like him on the rollouts. I like him across the middle. I think he can be really good at that. Jay Lehman thinks he can be an NFL player. So I'm not going to quibble with that. I think he's got the potential to be that. But yeah, they need a more dynamic option there. And they had Nicario Harper to potentially, I think, play that Sidney Brown role, but they got one upperclassman in that secondary with Taz Nicholson. And while we saw Tyler Strain and while we saw Xavier Scott, they need more playable, ready to make an impact depth. And they got a heck of a sell with Devin Witherspoon and Tony Adams, right? The last couple of years under this staff becoming NFL players. And obviously Nate Hobbs the years before, they can sell that a little bit, say, hey, he came through Illinois too. So yeah, I think why not? you upgrade. You don't just say, yeah, those guys played, so we're going to make them starters next year. No, you add competition.
Because you don't want to be worse than 7-5 next year, 6-6 at the minimum. Yeah, like where does that? So offensive line is the best pitch, I think, right? I mean, we just went on the whole spiel about it. So then you're somewhere,
running back,
and then some ordering of defensive line and defensive back, and you can quibble with however you want to order those two, but it's both a pretty good pitch. So probably D line.
I go DB before or first before defensive line. Like defensive line, yes.
Okay, yeah, fair.
You're not going to have a first or second round pick. Johnny might have a chance if a team falls in love with him, but Devin Witherspoon should be a top 45 pick, right? Like Sidney Brown and Quan Martin were all Big Ten. You know, Sidney, I think an All-American PFF or something.
He got somewhere, yeah.
But yeah, those guys are that caliber of guys. Johnny Newton's been that kind of guy too, but I just think DB maybe a hair over D-line, but we're quibbling.
Sure, yeah. And I think, and to the point that you made earlier about Jyaire Hill, it is hard to ignore the, hey, what's up with the coordinator elephant in the room, right? Especially when the coordinator position coaches one of those positions back there.
Yeah, I'll hit on that real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, you'd love that answer. You'd love that answer right now. I'm sure Brett Bielema wants that answer. Ryan earned this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's not a knock on Ryan by any stretch.
Like I know fans are like, oh, just sign an extension, whatever, and you can still sign, do whatever. Ryan's earned this. Like, and he is clearly pursuing jobs, and he should, because you only get so many opportunities to do this. His star is hot right now with the Broyles Award. You never know if it's going to be the same next year, all those different things. But he interviewed obviously for Colorado. Sounds like he might be in the mix for Purdue. Like, he earned those. Like, and it sounds like maybe he's in the mix for other, I don't know, but like there's only 4 FBS jobs open, and they need to hire their coaches within days. Right. So we should know within days of where Ryan Walters will be.
Yeah, and sure, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't want it to sound like, oh, this guy freaking Illinois can't do it, because that's not the case. And you're right, you do got to maximize those things. But I think once you get some clarity on that, I would think that'll give you clarity on the recruiting trail too. And maybe it's not like a massive hold up, but at least if you're a safety considering Illinois, you would wonder, like, well, who's my position coach going to be?
Yeah, and I don't even know if like his transfers, if they have as big, because Aaron Henry's still there. Like, you're still probably running the same defense next year, just a different guy calling it, whether it's Kevin Kane or whoever, right?
Outside hire, yeah.
Yeah, like you're probably running something very, very similar with a good coaching staff and Brett Bielema there. So you can still answer some of those questions, but when you're Jyaire Hill, like Ryan Walters is probably going to take a head coaching job within the next 2 years. And you know that, right? But like Ryan Walters would be a big part of why you choose Illinois. These are, let's be honest, like these are good problems to have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The cornerback is probably the most fascinating for me, because I think you add Harper, you have Matthew Bailey. I think you can answer some of your safety questions. I think you and I are of the belief Matthew Bailey starts at one of the safety positions next year.
And with Harper, and I think it's free.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. We saw him in the dime package, and I think that's, remember how Kendall Smith found his way to the free safety spot is by getting in on the dime package in 2021. So yeah, so I think you look at those two, and then it becomes, okay, how you need another corner. You got a pretty darn good pitch in the portal for a corner, and then you probably need to explore the slot, right? You need to explore the Quan role, whether that ends up being Harper in the long run, and that you find a new Sydney, or whatever that looks like. Like those are the two. You need a top number one corner, and you need a safety who could either be a strong or a slot. And I think that makes you breathe a little bit better.
I'm laughing at us because we are doing the O-line chatter, the safety chatter,
and we haven't talked about the quarterback yet.
Yes. It's partly because we might be just, hey, keep listening to this pod, we'll eventually get to it. Like there's maybe a tease part of that. We're doing our
Someone has
secrets.
been screaming in their
Yes.
car on the way
Would
to
you
work.
talk about Devin Leary and Tommy DeVito? And
Sorry.
part of it's because we don't have answers, right? Brett Bielema is being very coy. I asked him directly about Tommy DeVito waiver. Got kind of a, yeah, we are, but I'm not going to comment on it specifically. And then Andy Kimball from Decatur Herald Review, your old stop, asked him again, and he basically gave a non-answer about it. I don't think they want to give an answer because I don't know if they have an answer quite yet, but everything I hear is they would love to have Tommy DeVito back. They're pursuing a waiver. I think they should. I heard they should have clarity at quarterback sooner than later. So I don't know what that means. I don't know who their other options in the portal are. I know they are looking at options in the portal. Does that include Devin Leary? I do not know. He is familiar with Illinois, obviously. I think it's a great pitch to Illinois. I'm sorry I don't have more answers for anybody, but anything like other than that, Joey, I think we're basically speculating. But if I had to pick right now, I would say it's Tommy DeVito is the top preference, it seems like. And why would Tommy come back for seventh year college? NIL, probably, right? You can make really good money being a Big Ten starting quarterback. And we'll see if that's the other big conversation here is NIL is how much can money Illinois raise? How much can they divvy this out? How do they divvy it out? Like with whatever funds you have, with whoever's operating it, how do you find a way to retain all this talent, to get other talent? And that's a big part of all of this right now, transfers and retaining talent. But it's the biggest question of the offseason. I think we should have an answer within the next couple of weeks, but Illinois has been very quiet about what they're doing here with the quarterback.
So let's break down why. Like, I think that might be the question. Well, why won't Brett Bielema just say why, say what they're doing? Well, because if you stand in a microphone and every time Brett Bielema talks, there's a microphone around, 8 out of 10 times, there's a microphone around when Brett Bielema talks, and you say into a camera, yes, we're pursuing a waiver for an additional year of Tommy DeVito. Ex-coach who is recruiting ex-transfer portal quarterback is calling that quarterback and saying, yo, what's going on over there? Like, are you even their top priority? They're trying to get their guy back. And this game moves very quickly. And
quarterback especially, yeah.
Yes, musical chairs is thrown around a lot. And it is the literal perfect way to describe this. So, like, every quarterback that enters a portal gives another team a quarter. Like, it's a trickle-down effect, right? And your powerhouses are going to be able to pick and choose who they want, and then it falls down from there. But that's why. Like, if you're frustrated that Brett Bielema won't sit there and give a straight answer in front of a camera, that's why. And then you run the risk on the other side of the NCAA saying, dude, you've done this 6 times. No. Like, that's the end. And then all of a sudden, everybody thought for 2 months or whatever the case, 2 weeks, Tommy DeVito was coming back. And then, like, it's just not really in good practice to start putting your waiver inquiries out in front of everybody because there's a lot of variance there.
Yeah, and I feel like I need to whiteboard. I don't want to bog this podcast down with all of it, but basically the Tommy DeVito waiver would be the same as the Alex Palczewski one. And that was a trial balloon with Michael Marquez. Marquez got it, so then they did it with Palczewski. Palczewski got it. And now you do it with DeVito, see if DeVito can get it, because he'd be the top option. I know Devin Leary was an NFL draft prospect coming in here, but Tommy DeVito's been in the system. He was really good for you. Like, he's healthy.
A whole room believes in this guy, by the way. Like, a whole locker room believes in him.
Yeah.
And not to say they wouldn't believe in it and transfer, but, like, there's comfort in seeing your guy run out there for a second year if you can make that possible.
And I don't know if Devin Leary wants to be here. Like, I don't know that. So, like, everyone's saying, well, you got to take Leary if you don't know on DeVito. Do we know that? No, I don't know that. Like, I don't know that today of whether it's like this option or this option. I got to choose now. I think Brett Bielema knows what he's doing. And I was told this as well, Joe, is if you found out the quarterback was in the portal through Twitter, it's too late.
Yeah,
So,
man. Look,
and here's my thing. Whatever happens with DeVito, whatever happens with Lee or whatever, there are too many talented quarterbacks, experienced quarterbacks for Illinois not to land a competent Power 5 quarterback. Like the fact that, we mentioned his name, Brett Gabbert went back to Miami, Ohio. He would have loved to play at Illinois. I think he would have been an okay option, like a solid option for them. Like the fact that he went back to Miami, Ohio, I think tells you how limited those starting spots are and how wanted a spot like Illinois is. Like, I don't think they're going to end up with nothing here. Like, that's my point.
yeah, your pitch is, hey, we're 8-4, we're playing the Big Ten, come be a starting quarterback for us. Your phone will ring. Our offense has evolved out of the Stone Age. We throw the ball around here.
And I think they might throw it more without Chase Brown here.
Yes. So, and I know this has been a conversation. So if you're listening to this, if you're still around and you haven't screamed so much that we had waited an hour to talk about the quarterback situation,
do you think people are upset that we didn't name like a name? Like this guy's
there's no question. We waited an hour and we don't even have a freaking name. Somebody said that. Maybe they even walked into work with their headphones on. We are not going to be well liked after this, Jeremy. But if you're thinking, hey, how do they balance this? Because quarterback recruiting is time sensitive. The NCAA doesn't always work in the parameters of efficient timeline. Yeah. And then you still have the whole, well, does Tommy DeVito want to play quarterback for a 7th year? I get it. Every last one of those questions is very, very fair. And you and I are wondering the same, like, how does this work here? Because there's a lot of moving parts. I will tell you, take a breath. Like, Brett Bielema has been around the block. He's coached college football for a while. This guy has a plan for backdrops that his guys like stand in front of. There is a plan. There's an A, B, C. Like I get it, and it's stressful because there's not a lot of information.
Yeah.
But I think this coaching staff has probably earned the value of trust to figure this out. And I wouldn't say like blindly believe or blindly follow everything, because you've got to question coaches. Like that's our job. It's fans have that. But I think with this, like, take a breath and just remember like where this has come and how detailed Brett is in his planning.
Yeah, they've earned a little bit of that trust, right? That they know what they're doing, and like they got multiple irons in the fire. It'll be interesting. They got 2 more potential weekends of official visits. I can tell you, getting a guy here in January is really important again, right? Because right now they have Donovan Leary and Kirkland Michaud. Because Art Sikowski sounds like he's becoming Coach Sikowski, which we all expected, and he's going to be fantastic in that role. But if DeVito is not the guy coming back, you got Leary and Michaud as your quarterbacks next year with some walk-ons, right?
And, well, Cal Swanson will be enrolled.
Cal Swanson, yeah, in January. And the plan isn't to play those guys as starters next year, right? So they do want to get a guy in January. I can tell you that for sure. So we should know in the next 2 weeks. We'll have all these answers. Here's the thing, like the demand for, like, just take people behind the curtains. Sometimes there's such demand for news and so little information that there's a lot of speculation. I get it. We're thinking about the same stuff, but sometimes like guys in our situation have to say what we don't know. I feel like more times people should say what they don't know. And I don't think a lot of people know what is happening with the quarterback.
No, let's be honest. I would guess very few people know what's happening with the quarterback. Like, the coaching staff is keeping this very quiet, very intentionally. Man,
and they do seem confident. They do seem confident.
Sure. So. Now, I want to ask, because we've seen a spring play out like this. Hello, Cam Thomas, in 2018. 18, I think it would have been. 19? 18. It would have been the spring of 18. Would you consider it I don't want to say a lost spring. That's such a hot take. But if you don't have your quarterback in there by spring ball, it's not lost, but it feels incomplete, doesn't it?
Yeah, it'd be a huge missed opportunity. I don't think they plan on doing that. But say that happened, that they don't get a transfer in here by spring. And you got to remember, even if it was Devin Leary, he's not probably playing in the spring.
Sure.
Because he's injured. they got Brandon Peters here in May. They got AJ Bush here in May, June, right? So it's still
Not the end of the world.
a veteran quarterback can still do it. But to wrap this all up, I think they will get a capable Power 5 transfer probably, or a guy that can play at the Power 5 level. And I think they'll be here in January. Or they'll have Tommy DeVito at quarterback.
If I would have told you a year ago that would be the case, I guess a year ago we didn't really even know Tommy DeVito was on the radar.
Yeah, we didn't know Tommy DeVito by this time. He was committed by this time. Yeah.
Was it really? I remember seeing him at a football game. It's like, who's this cat? And turns out it was him. Or not a basketball game. Sorry. So yeah, we said this after Northwestern, Jeremy. I think it was. This thing's going to be wrapped up soon. It's just might be one of those things where it's like Illinois was in on that guy or that happened. Like there's going to be an element of, I don't know, maybe not an element of surprise if you get a waiver for Tommy, but it's just, I don't know, there's going to be a big grand parade like, hey, expect this, because they'll, follow the visits probably isn't going to apply.
They should make a TV show about it. Like how many, like
would Matt Leinart be the host? Would Matt Leinart? He's a handsome devil. I bet he could be the host of like that'd be a good show. That'd be a really good show. And
quarterback musical chairs. Like they can actually just during the show, like it's a reality show of all these coaches meeting with the transfer quarterbacks. Like, can you imagine that show of like Caleb Williams last year?
Everybody. Oh. The ratings would be unbelievable.
Fantastic.
Unbelievable. Now, there's a lot of problematic elements to that, but the ratings would be unbelievable for that. That'd be fun. That would be really fun. But the point being, transfers in general, Jeremy, run quiet. This isn't high school. They've kind of played that game before. This is a very business-like operation. And Brett Bielema has shown that he understands when you want to kind of, hey, we got X number of official visitors. This, he doesn't make secret, at least on social media, the retweets and the whole operation. Transfers run quieter, and Brett Bielema enjoys the secrecy of some of that stuff, because if someone from the staff follows, there are crazy people on this podcast who will check Twitter follows, and like it's very calculated in how they do things. So it's just going to be interesting, but maybe it'll be done in the next, I don't know. What do you think? What is this, like by Christmas?
By the end of all right. So they can host official visitors this weekend. They can host official visitors January 4th through the 8th. So
by January 8th, this is over.
Yeah. We should know by then.
Hey, if you guys can hang out another 24 days, that's not right. That math isn't right. Don't call me on that.
At the end of the day, Joey, this class has a chance to be pretty darn good. They're number 42 in the country right now. Right now, number 6 in the Big Ten. All those numbers will change. But this probably is going to be the best recruiting class Illinois has had, at least since 15, potentially since 9 or 10. So, and we'll break down signing day, like what we think of these individuals in the class, but they got a chance to really end this class on a high note.
They do. And I don't remember, maybe I just selectively quit remembering things, Jeremy. Was there this many?
Welcome to your 30s, Joe.
Dude, I just had a cup of hot tea and I have a freaking essential oil diffuser. I've passed my 30s. We are cruising much later than that.
You are a domesticated animal now, Joe.
Yeah. Were this many? I remember Gabe Ackes was a signing day guy, but I don't remember this much going down to the wire a year ago. Do you? Or am I just selectively
remember we had
that?
Cody Jones potential flip last
year. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Which was a little intrigue. Yeah, it's been a while. Like less kids are doing the signing day thing. Shimon Cooper was into January, from what I remember. Seth Coleman was a potential flip to Utah.
Keith Randolph, Florida State was all over him, if I remember correctly.
It was a signing day thing. So yeah, usually they end up being pretty good.
Johnny Newton was a late in the process flip as well for Lovey and his staff, and that really paid off. And holding on to Keith Randolph and Seth Coleman paid off.
The late ones have been pretty good, whether it's a late find or a late flip or, all these things have been pretty good for Illinois. As for bowl opt-outs, draft decisions, we'll have to find those out. I would be surprised if Devin Witherspoon participated in the bowl game. And it sounds like Sidney Brown might be a guy who might not. Like, all those things can change. We'll find out here. We'll ask Brett Bielema again. He didn't really give us any insight, but sounds like those two guys are capable. Like Chase Brown, couldn't blame him, but he does have a record to play for.
Go get 50 and take a seat on the bench, man.
56. He needs 56.
56, yeah. So get 56.
Yeah.
And then that field, get 56 and see if Josh McCray. That'd be a long time since he could play. Let him go up. When Brett Bielema talked about, I've really continued this conversation for too long, that like it's a cap that it epitomizes everything he said, like the cap, the record on 2022 and springboard to 2023 is get Josh McCray some valuable touches and yards. To me, that's the ideal situation, and you get Reggie Love some carries in that as well, and you don't burn any red shirts in the process.
There you go. There you go. Joey, I wanted to go 40 minutes, but you and I can't do it. I cannot do it. There's too much to talk about. So hopefully
I'm glad I didn't take I thought about taking melatonin before we got on here, and that would have really sent this thing into a tailspin here after 10.
An actual snore on the pod would have been fun. Like, I would have literally talked to you to sleep. That would have been
it truly sounds charming to me. But
just put our pod in afterwards and just lulling you to sleep with my take on the offensive line. Oh, somebody probably actually does that.
I'm telling you, dude, we lost people a half hour ago.
Well, they missed the quarterback, the huge quarterback information we just dropped.
Oh, we laugh, but we're sorry we don't have more information.
It'll come out sooner or later. All right, Joey Wagner. Thank you, buddy.
All right, man. See you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll have plenty up. I got more of Avery Jones, the ECU transfer, coming up as well. And we just got a busy December. No off seasons for the Illinois football beat. And of course, we got everything going on with Illinois basketball after Brad Underwood's classic press conference. Give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts. Again, follow us on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and check out everything at Illini Inquirer. Everybody have a great night. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.